allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray for the Lord's blessing on all of us gathered here tonight as we conduct our city business for the people of Perryville. Amen.
Amen. Oh. Excuse me.
Actually, I've got one comment. It's
Item number 2, citizen participation. Anyone like to address the board?
yeah.
So motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
Moving to second, any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 18, discussion regarding purchasing policy revision.
I'm gonna run for the next couple items, Mayor. We've hinted and suggested for several different meetings over the course of the last year that we're looking at the purchasing policy. Paul is here if we have any questions specific to that. Tracy and myself also worked on it, but with permission, Mayor, I won't read the whole thing, but I'd like to hit some of the big highlights so you guys kind of know what we're thinking. You guys can follow along. The first big change, I think, comes on page 2, the second page. So right now, there's a city administrator limit of up to $10,000. Anything in excess of that, there's a very prescribed purchasing policy that we follow. So that's why you get the phone call sometimes when a pump goes out or something like that. So we've looked, and what we're suggesting is the board consider upping that to $20,000. I think it would streamline some of these purchases. We've seen some inflationary increases. We've seen some material prices increase. Pumps comes to mind. Jeff could maybe think of other things, but most of the time it's a public works pump that we would need a higher level of approval and keep that moving quickly. Below that, we also changed purchasing agent. Before, it really identified Tracy's position. Now we talk about the finance department, which is under Paula's supervision in part, and works with Gina to make sure it all works just fine. Questions at that point, guys? On page 3, we recreated our quick cheat sheet. You can see before it was 500 to 2,000, now it's 1,000, or before it was 1,000 to, excuse me, items under 2,000, that's what we're talking about there. So anything between $500 and $2,000, we would get no less than 2 oral quotes. And then items between $2,000 and $20,000, we would pursue written quotes just like we do now to document the competitive nature of those things. The next big change, a lot of these other things are just saying the same things in different ways. We're taking it out of the chart now and putting it into a narrative, but the end result is really the same. So I'm going to skip ahead to page, I apologize, page 5. Number 3 says in blue, between $2,000 and $20,000, again, we're doing written quotes. But we have in there in certain situations where local competition is likely, the city administrator may require additional effort to secure proper quotes. So, for example, if we have 3 tire dealers in town, it makes sense to get quotes from all 3 of them as opposed to just picking 2 of them. So those are the times that we would apply that, and it's mostly because of experience. People want to be asked, so we try to do that. I'm going to skip ahead again, guys, to page 7. We talk about the use of credit cards need to be restricted to purchasing those goods and services that cannot be procured through normal procedures. The ideal situations where we have store credit, we buy the item, we send them a bill after you guys approve it. What that does is it allows the maximum ability for the city to track those purchases. Sometimes if we purchase things on credit cards, which we need to, but to identify the specific items in which department, it gets a little more complicated. So we would like to continue tracking that. So credit cards are the exception, not the rule. Page 7 there at the bottom, it's the responsibility of the credit card user to obtain receipts from merchants. From time to time, that becomes a problem for us, which then creates a problem for the auditor. So we really should have a credit card receipt or a good reason. You know, there's been an occasion when we go to MFA, the feeder's out, so I always call Gina right away and say, hey, I can't get a receipt. This is what we spent to document that purchase. Internet purchases, they're on page 8. That was new language. Sometimes it is necessary to get something to eBay or Amazon. We have a process in place when that becomes necessary. Page 9, number 2, under contracts, minor business service agreements. The city administrator may approve service agreements for projects where fees will not exceed $20,000. So the same purchasing policy that we can terminate at any time or for less than a year in length. You know, sometimes we have to sign a contract for a small maintenance to install internet services or something like that. So this would kind of streamline that process and make it better.
Sorry.
So again, it's nothing that has long-term implications for the city or high dollar value. It would just be these little smaller service contracts. At the top of page 10, guys, we added a little bit of language. This comes up from time to time. For example, if we have a trash truck that has problems and we take it to Larry Schmidt to do the diagnosis and he takes it apart, it doesn't make sense to put it back together and take it to the next guy to get a quote. We found the same thing with tractor repairs. Whenever they have to tear open the equipment, get in there, pump repairs is another good example. Usually we pick a reputable dealer or a reputable repair shop, and what they say, you know, we're kind of beholden to them, because it doesn't make sense to pay somebody and put it back together just to get another quote. We added prevailing wage language on page 12. That just mirrors state statute. On page 13, we talked about immunity, which Tom, by the AG and Missouri Constitution, perhaps we cannot waive immunity for those kind of things. And there's some anti-Israel discrimination language, which is also statutorily required. I think that became law last year in 2020 or 2019. So we just inserted those things in there. And then the other thing we've been working on a little bit, or been on my list for a while, was page 14 and 15. This is the city's process for disposing surplus property. We have a long-standing procedure in place where staff write up a memo, give you guys pictures, we ask permission. It was never detailed anywhere. So this kind of provides detail on how we want to do that to make sure we're consistent. And with that, I'd answer any questions you guys might have.
No question. Thank you, sir.
All right.
But take action on that tonight, or?
Yeah, we'd like some direction. I think we put, I'm getting back to my agenda. Did we put just review, Tracy?
Yeah, I think what our thought was, if you guys liked it, we'll bring it back as on a resolution for
the
approving
next
the
meeting.
policy at the next meeting.
So what do you need?
Nothing.
Just a head nod, I guess.
Yeah, just really, I wanted to go over it this time. It'll be just a resolution next time for ease. All right, and then Paul, you got the next one.
Item 19, discussion regarding capital reserve recommendation from city treasurer Trevor.
Okay, so right now, I have the current policy listed there. We actually have two reserves now. We have the capital reserve balance and the working capital. They're both 25%, so we have a total reserve of 50%. I went through our history back 5 years. There were several times we were below it. We always came back up to it, usually within about a year. Usually it was for a capital expense that we decided to do, spend the money, and then replenished. After reviewing several cities' recommendations from the Missouri finance officers, their recommendation is nothing below 20%. We feel like our reserve is a little bit higher than what it needs to be. We have been doing a lot of capital projects. We've been consistent with our projects. our expense has went up throughout the years, yet our cash value has also went up. So based on the recommendations, I also have some, comparisons to other cities. It was questioned with the Missouri Finance Officers Committee, put out to other cities on what their reserves were. The majority were well below the 50% that we have now. This allows us to complete the projects that we want to complete. It frees up money basically so that we can do those projects. So our recommendation, after reviewing and comparing, our recommendation would be to only have one reserve, an operational reserve, and have it 30%. The Missouri Finance Officer says not below 20. A lot of the cities are below 20. But we also, any of our grants, funding that we do, we usually pay the invoice and then request the funds to be reimbursed. Without that 30% reserve, having it that amount, I wouldn't feel comfortable that we would always have that money to pay the invoices in advance.
You know, a good example of that, guys, is down at MoDOT. MoDOT, we're partners on the airport, so when we get a bill from a contractor, we generally use this money to pay that bill, and then MoDOT reimburses us and we put that money back. If we don't keep some level of reserve, we won't be able to do that, and contractors are gonna wait twice as long before they get payment, so.
Are there any questions? I know I said that quickly, so.
Just out of curiosity, I know, like, the gas department, you know, we had that problem back in February. I know we had money on reserve, and I think it ended up costing us, what, $300,000. Is that roughly 30% of what the gas?
Yeah, actually, I can look back and see, we actually, gas, our utilities, we consistently have, that's where we have our excess funds. That's where we have, so I feel very comfortable in the 30%, and even if something comes out. Our unassigned always is about 90% from our utilities. So back in February, we actually, we were still at our 25%. We didn't even go below our 25% whenever we had that. So, our utilities, we usually have excess money there. The general fund is the one that I certainly wouldn't wanna go below the 30%, but I feel comfortable. We've not been, that's the one, if we go below the 50%, it's usually that fund, but we've always been able to replenish it quickly. So.
I think Paula did a great job putting everything together. You know, the last policy statement she drafted, 30%'s the goal. Anything below 20% in a pinch, if we dropped to 28%, we didn't wanna have to pull the board to do that to pay a bill. So anything below 30 is a goal, anything below 30 till you get to 20 is just staff. But then if we ever hit 20%, it'll be discussed with the board, because that's the GFOA standard. So we think we got some flexibility in there, but the ability to put more money to work for the people.
But it's not a serious offense if we go below, because that's what it's for, right?
Correct, we don't wanna go below without your approval, so that's what put in there. It's not an offense, it's up to the city what they wanna do, so.
I like it. It's a better use of finances. I mean, keep things flowing instead of sitting there doing nothing. And we do have the backup plan, if we ever, in an emergency, we can go to the bank and borrow the money we need.
Yes,
And
yeah.
we pay it. So it's not like we're gonna shut down and this reserve goes to zero.
And
We've got
we,
other options past
and
that.
we include in our budget, so it doesn't, we include large projects in our budget every year.
Yeah.
And so that's part of our budget, part of what we plan to spend, so this is kind of on top of that.
That's another thing Paula pointed out. So say something really bad happens, we might delay a project, we might not install water lines, we might not line sewer lines in a year. So then we have access to that funds. So we're protected in lots of different ways, and Paula's done a good job articulating that.
I got one more question.
Uh-huh.
I was looking at the financial report a little bit,
And I saw like year-to-date revenue and year-to-date expenses. Right now, we're at like roughly $400,000 to the good. We've actually taken in more revenue than expenditures.
Yes.
Does that include like all the capital improvements we've done that we're scheduled to do this year? We paid for them.
That is only year to date, so that is
But-
only what we've paid for, it's not what we have budgeted to pay for.
Right.
So,
But I'm saying, those numbers end up in the same revenue and expenses for 1 year.
yes.
The
Yes.
capital improvements we do every
Yes,
year
It
end up
falls
in the.
within those categories,
So
yes.
that's how I understood it, I just wanted to verify.
Yes. Mhm.
So that'll also come back at the next meeting then for an official decision, but we wanted to review it with you guys this meeting. Right?
Well, I think we have the ordinance on here for first reading.
Oh, okay, very good, very good, so I
Even
apologize,
better.
it is on there.
Good job, Paul. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Item number 21, item 20, discussion relative to board redistricting.
So as we told you guys, this whole process has been odd this year because of COVID. The federal census numbers were delayed by district. We finally got those numbers, worked with regional planning. Yeah, the goal is really not to have a deviation in excess of 10%. We do have that because of transitioning and growing population. So the very first attachment, guys, is what we have currently. Just a refresher, that's what our wards look like right now. The blue is Ward 1, the green is Ward 2, the red is Ward 3. The very next slide, so if we would do the minimum amount of work to the wards as they're currently, this is what that could look like. We would adjust Moore Drive, we'd adjust between Highway 61 and Old St. Mary's Road. We'd move a couple people from the green, from Ward 2, we put them into Ward 1, and that would meet the spirit of the law as it's defined today, but barely. And in a couple years, we're probably gonna be out of whack because of the way our population's growing. So proposal B, the next one, is really what I believe to be a more permanent, longer-term solution. It does impacts more people initially. Each of those numbers you see in the hatched areas is the number of people that live there by census tract. The Moore Drive number, I think, is combined with that 162. That's why you don't see a number there. But last time we did this, which would have been 2011, I think it was right after I got here, that weird little bump on St. Joe was done, and that we bumped out to get the balance right, but it's always been a little awkward because it would be so nice to say you're in Ward 2 based on your relationship to St. Joe, not based on your relationship to that little bump out. So if we would look long-term, my preference, if the board's willing, to impact more people this time, but to straighten out some of those things like that. So what that would look like is the Moore Drive in that area between Old St. Mary's Road and 61 would bump over into Ward 1. That little bump out on St. Joe, which is really next to Easy Pump, I believe is where we're at from the top of my head, that would go back into Ward 3, and then that 218 would also transition into Ward 3.
Got a question then.
Yep.
How does the number go from 2760 down to 2576 if I lose 184 and gain 218?
So what, let me say I might have said that wrong. So we're taking that 184 and we're putting it over
In Ward 2,
in Ward 2,
and you,
and then we're moving that 236 over
218
218, you're right.
into Ward 3.
Goes to 2794.
Yeah, it goes up above it, it says proposed Ward 3 population.
2794.
Oh, I was gonna say down here, it says 2576.
Yeah,
They never added.
yeah,
So
so,
7576 is what is in pink.
Okay,
so yeah, the numbers in the top right corner would be the ward total, so you can see how tight that
Where's
deviation.
218 start at? Is that their Sycamore?
It's Sycamore Road, Kurt, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. So that's back here.
By Buddy Hellman.
Buddy Hellman's
Yeah.
all the way out to
Yeah.
bypass.
Picnic
Picnic
Yeah.
ground.
I'm getting a lot of population out of that.
There's a little pink shed out there
A
with
weekend
nothing.
a year you do.
Mm-hmm.
And 218.
Can I count that picnic bunch?
What's that?
So that little bitty, gray area is actually in the county.
Really?
That's at Matt Whitmire property.
Oh, okay.
It's the cities, yeah.
Yeah, so the city's kinda grown around it and Matt's never annexed. We did the street through there with that
Right,
agreement,
right.
he paid for that. But that's what that is.
And he,
I thought there was something.
I thought he was gonna annex.
I thought he was gonna
No.
annex.
No. He was gonna pay for the street, but not annex. Yeah, we could pull that agreement back out if you need to.
What would happen if an alderman got moved into a different ward?
So that, I didn't look, I don't think that happened with any of you guys.
I'm just curious.
But you would have to, just like when they redistrict at the federal or state level, you'd have to run in that
The new
new
ward.
yeah. I maybe should have done that, but I didn't.
It is, it's the other side of the street.
Yeah,
That's it. So I'm guessing it starts at Plaza Drive and Wally goes up through there to, the end of St. Mary's Road is what I'm assuming.
Yeah, I can't tell with that.
Is that the 162? Yeah, also War Drive. Is that the way I'm looking at that?
yeah.
Okay.
It's 61 to Old St. Mary's Road.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is the southeast line of that, is that the bypass?
yeah. So, and that's why I like that one, Dave, cause then we can describe based on those bigger properties, those bigger streets. So what's your pleasure, fellas?
Knock it out, go for it.
A or B?
B.
B,
I like B2.
Okay.
there's a B2 on there too?
So I'm hearing B. So what our intention would be is to bring back an ordinance for the next meeting reflecting the changes found in B.
Then you'll be contacting the people?
Yeah, and then once it's approved, we'll let everybody know, that the changes that are impacting them and where their new trash day is, those kind of deals. And we'll have it in place before filing. That was the
You
critical
mean you're not
thing.
gonna keep the trash dates, I mean, seriously?
No, it's gonna be the
No.
ward.
Because then it really gets weird, Kurt, what day is your
Okay.
trash picked up? Ward 1 is this day. To say Ward 1 in part of 2, it really communicates better and it's easier to understand. It'll be a change in behavior.
You didn't really go by that little kick out on St. Joe because they weren't in the right ward. When your truck's going by there, didn't they?
No, they put it out there today.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 2 sides of the street on Main Street.
It helps us in utilities, we have lots of people call and wanna know what ward they live in, and we'll
Yeah,
ask them,
it was
what
Bruce
day does your
Street.
trash get picked up, and that's when we know.
Bruce
what
Street,
ward
Grand,
they're in.
and School Street.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, if you're
All on
going
one
down
side.
St. Mary's Road, and there's trash, I mean, we'll come back the next day and take the trash out on the other side.
Well, but what works is,
That's the
That
way
just
to do
sounds
it.
like a heat.
we just drive one side of the street, and then we just happen to drive the other side the other day. But we don't, in the old days, we would park in the middle of the street and get on both sides.
Right.
We drive the street, we pick it up, we just drive the other side the next day.
I don't think it's affect, you take my neighbor's trash out every morning. Isn't there a feedback?
Alright, so B it is, the intentions, Tom, we can talk about, I don't think it has to be an emergency ordinance.
No, we can get it passed, but it's going to be probably Tracy and Sherry and I, it's very intricate writing these
So you're saying that that line
redistricting
right there is
ordinances, so
bypass?
we'll wanna jump on it really quickly because we'll have to sit down and track it street by street
Okay.
to describe it properly, so we'll get right on it.
Alright,
So it's from the
Well,
bypass,
there's really no legal description.
from the bypass
Describe
on
it by
St. Mary's
street.
Road 61,
Yeah.
that's the 162, is
Yeah, we can't tell on.
that right?
yes, I think that's
Okay.
correct, yes,
Okay.
alright.
Sounds like we got fewer people to represent.
Thank you guys.
Not the same amount, man, it says it right here, we actually got more. According to theirs.
All good? Okay. You know, I do want, bill number 6222, for order number 6440. Engineering, agreement with Lobby Cement Finishing Incorporated relative to Northeast Outfall Sewer Replacement Phase 2 project, second reading and final passage.
Move for second reading.
Second.
An ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Perryville, Missouri to execute a contract by and between the city and Loppy Cement Finishing Inc. relative to Northeast Alcohol Sewer Replacement Phase 2 project. Further, said ordinance shall authorize and direct the city clerk to attest the signature of the mayor. The rest by reference.
Move for final passage.
Second.
Burek.
Aye.
Hudson.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Riney.
Aye.
Schumer.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays, 1 absent.
Item 22, bill number 6223, for ordinance number 6441, entering into amendment number 1 to Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission amendment to state block grant agreement 20-0638-1 relative to airport layout plan update, second reading and final passage.
Move for second reading.
Second.
An ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Perryville, Missouri to execute a state block grant agreement by and between the city and Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission relative to amendment 1 to state block agreement 20-063A-1 for runway reconstruction justification study at the Perryville Municipal Airport. Further, said ordinance shall authorize and direct the city clerk to attest the signature of the mayor. The rest by reference.
Move for final passage.
Second.
Hudson.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Riney.
Aye.
Schumer.
Aye.
Burek.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays, 1 absent.
Item 23, bill number 6224, for ordinance number 6442, entering into an aviation project consultant supplemental agreement number 1, construction services with Crawford Murphy and Tilly Incorporated relative to airport layout plan, airport GIS, and FAA planning deliverables, second reading.
Move for second reading.
What does that mean? Second reading and final passage, I'm sorry.
Move for second reading.
Second.
An ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Perryville, Missouri to execute a contract by and between the city and Crawford Murphy and Tilly Inc. relative to supplemental agreement number 1 relative to MoDOT project 20-063A-1 runway reconstruction and justification study at Perryville Regional Airport. Further, said ordinance shall authorize and direct the city clerk to attest the signature of the mayor. The rest by reference.
Move for final passage.
Second.
Martin.
Aye.
Riney.
Aye.
Schumer.
Aye.
Burek.
Aye.
Hudson.
Aye.
5 ayes, no nays, 1 absent.
Item 24, bill number 6225, for ordinance amending section 2.88.732 relative to victims of domestic or sexual violence leave, first reading.
Move for first reading by title only.
Second.
An ordinance amending Title II, Chapter 2.88 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Perryville, Missouri relative to victims of domestic or sexual violence leave, and repealing all ordinances in conflict therewith. The rest by reference.
Item 25, bill number 6226, for ordinance amending section 3.04.035 of the Code of Ordinances relative to reserve fund policy, first reading.
Move for first reading by title. Second.
An ordinance amending Title III, Chapter 3.04.035, Section 3.04.035 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Perryville, Missouri relative to reserve fund policy and repealing all ordinances in conflict therewith. The rest by reference.
Item 26, bill number 6227, for ordinance amending Title IX of the Code of Ordinances relative to repeal of chapter 9.05 regarding regulation and methamphetamine precursor drugs, first reading.
Move for first reading by title.
Second.
I'll second it too.
An ordinance amending Title IX of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Perryville, Missouri relative to repeal of Chapter 9.05 regulation of methamphetamine precursor drugs and repealing all ordinances in conflict therewith. The rest by reference.
Item 27, bill number 6228, ordinance amending section 9.04.190 of the Code of Ordinances relative to protecting free speech and prohibiting the display of certain words, first reading.
Move for first reading by title only.
Second.
An ordinance amending Title IX, Chapter 9.04 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Perryville, Missouri relative to protecting free speech and prohibiting the display of certain words and repealing all ordinances in conflict therewith. The rest by reference.
Item 28, bill number 6229, for ordinance amending section 17.28.020 of the Code of Ordinances relative to removal of shipping containers in C2 General Commercial District, first reading.
Move for first reading by title only.
Second.
An ordinance amending Title 17, Chapter 17.28, Section 17.28.020 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Perryville, Missouri relative to removal of shipping containers from C2 General Commercial District and repealing all ordinances in conflict therewith. The rest by reference.
Item 29, bill number 6230, for ordinance amending section 17.64.030 of the Code of Ordinances relative to time length for acting upon a decision of the Board of Adjustment, first reading.
Move for first reading by title only.
Second.
An ordinance amending Title 17, Chapter 17.64, Section 17.64.030 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Perryville, Missouri relative to time limit for acting upon a decision of the Board of Adjustment and repealing all ordinances in conflict therewith, the rest by reference.
Item number 30, bill number 6231, for ordinance entering into an agreement with Todd Shelley Farms LLC relative to snow removal at the Perryville Regional Airport, first reading.
Move for first reading by title only.
Second.
An ordinance authorizing the mayor of the City of Perryville, Missouri to execute a contract by between the city and Todd Shelley Farms LLC relative to Perryville Regional Airport snow removal project. Further, said ordinance shall authorize and direct the city clerk to attest the signature of the mayor, the rest by reference.
Number 31, bill number 6232, for ordinance accepting easement deeds from Kimberly Kimmel and from Sam and Diana Watts, first reading.
Move for first reading by title only.
Second.
An ordinance authorizing the mayor and city clerk of the City of Perryville, Missouri to attest to the city's acceptance of certain property, which said property is particularly set forth in the attached easement deeds, the rest by reference.
Item number 32, committee reports, public works, Alderman Schumer.